How many of you have used Oregon Trail software? Oh my God, well, if you want to know how old I am, I worked on that software. And how many of you have rented a textbook from Chegg? Oh, I love you. Thank you so much for doing that. How many use Netflix? And the most important issue, how many of you pay? All right, so I've just taken you through 3 decades. I'm owning my age of product leadership career. I'm going to talk about the good in that. I'm going to talk about the bad in that. And I'm going to talk about the ugly. And then I'm going to try to abstract some learnings from those 30 years. 3 strategy models that I've used across all of them. And I'm hoping that going forward, you'll have more success and fewer failures than I. So early in my career, it began with Oprah Winfrey throwing Tickle Me Elmo onto the stage, and that became the hit product of 1995. This was Elmo's Preschool. And then I went on to build a kids software startup called Creative Wonders with all of these characters. And then sold that company to this dude, Mr. Wonderful, Kevin O'Leary, who was the president and CEO of the Learning Company. And in turn, we helped that company to grow, and we sold it to Mattel for $3.5 billion. And then 2005, met this gentleman. These are DVDs for the very young folks in the audience. And helped that company to grow to 190 countries, streaming worldwide. Internet TV is born. This is 2010. Chegg, textbook rentals. It gets big. And then we shift to a homework help, a digital service, helping students. Went public, tail end of 2013. There's one person that doesn't own a suit in this picture, and that is me. And that was easy. What? Well, actually, I'll tell you what really happened. And it was hard. So we sold the Learning Company to Mattel for $3.5 billion, and it lost 90% of its value 2 years later when they spun it out of the building. And that was my lesson in building really a fad and failing to build hard-to-copy, durable advantage. That's why that happened. Netflix, it took 12 years to turn it into a unicorn. In 1 month in 2011, it went from $40 billion market cap down to $10 billion. That was bad. And that took 20 years to get to its current market cap, which is about $150 billion. And then the story of Chegg, it took 5 years to get any funding. It started as essentially a Craigslist for college students. You could sell your used couch. Not a strong idea. When we went public, at the beginning of the day, we came out at $1 billion, and by lunch, we were worth $400 million. That's not a good day. And after 14 years, it's now worth $3.5 billion. And that's actually ahead of the schedule for dear Netflix. I'm assuming you don't want to hear about building Oregon Trail software. So I'm going to spend some time talking about Netflix. The product vision was straightforward. We were going to get big on DVD, and then we were going to lead downloading. And that was the word that was used. The word streaming didn't exist. If you said it, people thought you said streamlining. That sounded quite bad. Then, once unburdened of DVD by mail system, we would expand globally. And then finally, the 4th chapter of Netflix, which they're very engaged in, original content. So that was the vision, and I'm going to introduce you to the reality. In 1999, 95% of the business was selling new DVDs. 5% was rental, and there was the insight that that was going to be the world of dear Amazon. So the company committed itself to the invention of DVD rental. In 2000, Netflix desperately tried to get Blockbuster to buy them for $50 million, and Blockbuster said no. 1 million members by 2002. And the way the system worked is you'd get 3 DVDs at a time, and it was $22 a month. This is business worked. Invested 18 months to expand internationally while we were still a DVD by mail service. And 1 week before launch, shut it down. Moved everybody back to the US because there was a rumor that Amazon was going to launch a DVD rental service in the US, which didn't happen for like 5 or 10 years. In 2008, the first experiment, an exclusive, Netflix's Red Envelope Studio. Didn't work. No economy of scale at the time. In fact, half of Netflix's high-level product strategies failed. Half. We launched Watch Instantly in 2007 with 300 titles. They were called steamy romances, which is code for something different. In 2007, this is genius. Because you spent $22 a month for those 3 DVDs, we'd give you 22 hours of streaming free for the month. Now, nobody could watch 22 hours of the stuff that we had. Okay? And this was us beginning to understand what the business model might be. Finally, in 2012, investment of House of Cards. Who's watched it? That's for me to make sure you have arms. This year, Netflix won 23 Emmys, tied with The King of the Hill for original content, which is Dear HBO. Extraordinary that over that time period, a bunch of Silicon Valley geeks are competing for original content with HBO. It's a nice story. You want to know about the ugly? Okay, I'll start slowly. This is what Netflix looked like in 1999. This is the product leader trick. Always show what it looked like before you showed up. Okay? And I got more ugly for you. This is Reed Hastings wearing a BoJack Horseman sweater at an earnings call. And probably the ugliest thing of all. Do you remember Qwikster? Yeah, this is pure genius. So you're building this DVD business, and the future is all about streaming, and you have 5 million members in the US, and now you're streaming internationally. You know you're going to be competing with Google and Amazon Prime and Hulu, and it's all going to be streaming, and you're desperately worried you'll be held down by that DVD service. So the genius is to separate into 2 companies. Andy Rendich on the left was the CEO of Qwikster. Reed would continue to be at Netflix. If you wanted to stream movies, you'd go to netflix.com. If you wanted to get your DVDs, you dinosaurs, you would visit Qwikster. That's what you did. And a very proud person at a DVD hub in the middle of the country got the Qwikster envelope, which was a secret, and they brought it home, and their journalist neighbor saw it. And because of it, they did a rush job announcing the launch of Qwikster. They did it in the courtyard on a Sunday at Los Gatos. And within 1 week, Andy Rendich, public CEO of Qwikster, made Saturday Night Live. So proud. And during this time, Netflix lost 800,000 customers, totally lost everybody's trust. And this is when they went from 40 billion market cap back to 10 billion. A devastating era. It was truly ugly. This is hard. So I've been engaged in a big success. I've been engaged in a success. And I've been engaged in devastating failure. The loss of almost $3.5 billion. And what I want to do is talk about what I've learned. And I'm hoping that you can apply these learnings to your lives. I love this definition of strategy. It's by Hamilton Helmer, who wrote a book, The 7 Powers. Really, his theory is there's 7 things that are hard to copy. And I'm engaged in the debate because I think there are 8, damn it. But his strategy, it's a route to continuing power in significant markets. And this route here is the Silk Road. Imagine inventing and pioneering a route that goes between Africa, Asia, and Europe for trade. And imagine figuring out the right path for that. And notice that it is twisty and curvy and full of surprises. And in the world of strategy, I think the same happens. Also recognize that there's a lot of things about this Silk Road the root that are hard to copy. It's protected by a couple of 100 miles by the Great Wall of China, which is a truly hard thing to build and a hard thing to copy. So I've got 3 models for you. The first is Glee. And this is for how I frame my thinking around a product vision. It exists to encourage people to think long term, really 10 or 15 years out, and it helps build initial focus and then phasing over time. My second model, I call it GEM. And it's really, how do you prioritize these 3 forces, growth, engagement, and monetization? It can be different for every company and different every time. And I use this to enable cross-functional alignment. It's an important prioritization tool. And the third model I want to share with you, I call it DHM. It's about delighting customers in these hard-to-copy, margin-enhancing ways. And for me, this is the foundation of product strategy, answering the question, what are the various theories and hypotheses that we have that will help delight customers in these hard-to-copy, margin-enhancing ways? So the first is the Glee model. So I'm going to share with you the thinking on these 3 different companies. With Creative Wonders, Sesame Street, and the Learning Company, the idea was we were going to get big on kid brands, and then we were going to lead grade-based software. So Sesame Street preschool, Sesame Street kindergarten, Reader Rabbit's first grade, Clue Finders 5th grade. These were all examples. And then our intent was to expand online, which did not happen. Okay? And that was the devastation of that bad experience with Mattel. With Netflix, get big on DVDs. And then lead downloading. And the third chapter of the life was to expand globally. At a moment in time when we were digital. So our mistake in the UK was expanding international when we were still bound by this DVD by mail system. It was a significant mistake. In the third Chegg, the idea was to get big on textbook rental. And then from my experience with Netflix, this would be easy. The next thing you would do, of course, is e-textbooks. We were going to lead that. And then the third chapter, this is thinking out 10, 15 years, was to expand via a notion of a student graph. If you had student graph for all students in the country, you could expand into different products and services over time that students would love. Except e-textbooks didn't happen. You or students, they have this loving experience with a book. It's the place that they sat on their parents' lap. They love books. And they didn't transition nearly as quickly as I expected. So we had to do some quick thinking. We said we were going to lead this high-margin digital business called Homework Help. And that has largely happened. Today, almost half of the business is Chegg Study, a homework help service. And the textbook by mail system is going well. So I'm just sharing with you how I thought about the Glee model and an evolving product vision over time that helps you to get big. In most of these cases, I was thinking 10 or 15 years out. Why was it important and helpful? I put waves on the left because I love to surf. But what I learned is if you can catch these waves over time, it helped accelerate the business. So for us, the first wave at Netflix was the DVD player. The second was video on the internet. And the other thing I like about the get big, the first step, is you need to get big on something that's going to be 10 times better than your competitor. It is 10 times better for a student to rent a textbook for $40 than it is to buy a new one for $200. And that's the initial focus of a product that's 10 times better than anything else. The next thing is the hard-to-copy advantage that most of us seek revolve around just these 3 ideas: an economy of scale, a brand, and a network effect. To achieve that, you have to get big. And then the third is it encourages long-term thinking. This model, as humans, we tend to think out 2 or 3 years, but this model forces you to think, okay, what am I today? What do I want to be in 5 or 10 years? And what do I want to be 15 years out? And that's why I use the Glee model, and I nicely pound on different teams I work with to think this way. The other thing is it helps people to understand you don't have to do everything at once. If Netflix in 2002 said, okay, we're going to do DVDs and streaming, we better get game on for getting original content, that would be ridiculous. But when you think about how it played out and phased out, in the long term, you begin to believe that anything is possible. And again, the Glee model helped our thinking here. Chegg. Growth, engagement, and monetization. This is Dan Rosenswag. He's the CEO of Chegg. Very sales-driven guy, loves raising money, incredibly effective at raising money. And the gentleman below him is Greg Stanger. He's a CFO. He has different thoughts about money than Dan. And my first 6 months in the company, I started to be pulled in radically different directions. And it was a problem for me. So one day I simply asked Dan, how would you prioritize growth, engagement, and monetization? And his answer was, growth first, baby, right? We're going to have 40% year-over-year growth in the number of student accounts as well as revenue. And then his second is engagement. And think of this as a proxy for product quality. We're going to keep making the product better as measured by the textbook rental retention, as measured by our homework help subscription retention. And using another proxy of Net Promoter Score, we're going to drive it from 60 to 80. We're going to make the product better. And this is a forced ranking. The thing that was third for him was monetization. And monetization at the time was proving out the unit economics. Could you buy a used textbook for $40 and get 3 turns over time? So you'd get 120 back from students. If you can do that, you had a wonderful high-margin business, you're generating cash, et cetera. But that takes 2 or 3 years to prove out. He said, we're going to get to that later. So I asked Greg Stanger, my CFO partner, the same question. He said, Gib, we're going to put monetization first, engagement second, and growth third. So you're a product leader. The CEO says this. The CFO says this. What do you do? No, this is a real question. What do? You what? You do the thing that's right for the customer. What else could you do? Is that going to solve it? I love this, the what Dan says. What do? You put them in a frickin' room. Okay, it's a cage match. Like, you guys are saying the opposite thing. Work to get your story straight. Let me know what the answer is. At the end of the week, they let me know the answer. It was growth first, engagement second, and monetization third. Okay? And at the end of the month, Greg chose to leave the company. Okay? Like, was my life better? Absolutely. I was no longer feeling pulled in all these different directions. And this is the beauty of the GEM model. It's the most common source of misalignment. If I step into a company and ask anybody, hey, how do you prioritize these 3 forces? If I get radically different answers from different people, I know that this is a company that hasn't gotten their story straight. They are not aligned. And it's hard to do great things if you're not aligned. It enables clear cross-functional prioritization. This is easy language, easy thinking. And in this case, I knew the CFO and the CEO were not aligned. And it's a simple shared language. And this is why I found the tool super helpful. Okay, and this is the beginning of building focus around the metrics, which are critically important. For each, you need to be specific about what is the metric for each of these 3 forces. All right, give me a D. Give me an H. Give me an M. What does it spell? That's the frickin' problem with this model. Okay? Because somebody help me out at some point. And this has been a helpful model for me. So think for a moment about all the things that could delight a customer about Netflix, all the things that you want. And then think for a moment about all the things that are hard to copy about it. And last, how are you going to create a business? Where's the margin? How is that going to work? What's the business model experimentation you need to do? All of those things. And this is the beginning exercise that helps you to over time, figure out what the strategy is. So in Netflix, it was largely about get you your DVD the next day in the mail. We drove that metric from about 50% of the time up to 90%, and that improved retention. Rock on. Streaming is good. Click button, and you're watching a movie. Awesomeness, right? Creating a simple service with lots of movies, and this all-you-can-eat value. Not every movie, but a lot of stuff that you can enjoy for about $12 a month. Now, think for a moment about what is hard to copy about Netflix. Why, if I gave you $100 million, would you choose not to go up against Netflix? What are the reasons why? What? The Q users. What else? Okay, scale. What else? Original content. Network. What? I couldn't hear it. Infrastructure. People. There's only one more I'm thinking. It's the last thing I get from a freaking room of product leaders. The freaking brand. Okay? So the 4 buckets. Original content is because of the economy of scale. The network effect that Netflix has, every device in the world is ready to stream Netflix instantly. The brand is a wonderful thing that you trust with your credit card every month for $12. And there's lots of unique technology. The scaling, my favorite, is personalization. And how does the business work? It took us a long time to figure that out. Like, we did advertising on the site. We sold all of our used discs. We were like hawking stuff. You want to get a used disc? But the big thing over time is we figured out the right level of value. Most of you are enjoying $12 a month service. So now, all of these ideas, you munch them together, and what are the theories and hypotheses about how you're going to delight customers in hard-to-copy, margin-enhancing ways? How will you improve retention? And here were the 12 ideas. What percentage of the time did Netflix get it right? I already told you, half. So half of these high-level theory hypotheses failed. This is hard. You're inventing the future. This is hard. And those top ones are the things that work. So if you want to look smart, you just say the strategy for Netflix is these 5 things. And then at any moment in time, you have proxy metrics that help measure whether or not you're making progress. And at any moment in time, you have tactics or projects. And this is a lockup. And this, for me, is what a product strategy looks like. And the only thing missing is the reinforcement of the retention. That was the key high-level metric. It went from 10% would cancel each month 15 years ago, and today only 2% cancel. And that's a good thing. So why is DHM important? It builds and drives customer obsession. This idea of how do you delight folks in the future? And just the understanding that there's no way you're ever going to be satisfied. And if you stop trying to get better, bad things happen. You can develop the long-term durable advantage, the focus on what is hard to copy. And then the last part of it, forever, you're going to be rethinking, testing different business models, different price tests for the rest of your life. And that's often forgotten, and that's in the margin enhancement. So a route to continuing power in significant markets, it was somewhat circular for us. It was a virtuous cycle. The idea was that the more customers that we had, the better our shot at talking Xbox and Wii and PlayStation into enabling watching on their devices. And if we could do that, we'd have more content. And the more content that we had, the more customers we'd have. And today, this virtuous cycle is pretty cool. More content, more customers, more customers, more content. And it's a beautiful thing. So now I'm just going to show you what that route looks like with all of these different ideas applying the Glee model. In the early days, get big on DVDs. Then lead streaming and this good lock in understanding how powerful episodic TV was for streaming. Then finally you expand internationally when you no longer worry about the DVDs. And then it's game on for original content. Now recognize we didn't know that was going to work. It failed in 2008, but it obviously works today. And at any moment in time, we would prioritize those things differently. At the beginning, classic startup, growth, engagement, monetization. But then, because we couldn't figure out the business, we flipped it. We said we're going to make monetization the key priority in 2005. And today, it's largely back to growth, engagement, and monetization with a little bit of tuning. Growth's first, but trying to figure out the business model. Have you noticed that your prices have been going up about $1 a year? That's the monetization coming to life. All right, notice on all 4 chapters over, God, almost 20 years, personal and easy, personal, easy, personal, easy. Personalization is wicked important. Today, I just want to share with you how important I think it is. Today, it's game time for original content. And really all that Netflix is doing is it's right-sizing its investment. It's making guesses for any title about how many of you will watch it. And then it's just making the right level of investment based on their forecast, based on its knowledge of 130 million customers, what they love and don't love. Frankly, it's 300 million. So I'll just illustrate this right-sizing concept. How many of you watched Stranger Things? Cool. The idea was 100 million people would enjoy it, so you could spend 500 million. How many watched The Crown? Gosh, we're down to about 70 million, so you just invest 350 million. They're right-sizing the investment. BoJack Horseman. Hey, why are you shaking your head left and right, Hope? Okay, so the idea is that 5 million people will enjoy it. That's me. And the right size investment is about 50 million. And this is the remarkable thing about what personalization is doing for Netflix today, delighting you in these hard-to-copy, margin-enhancing ways, which I just think is way cool. Okay, but wait, there's more. I don't know, Google disappointed me. There's 3 more things. The first thing is courage. It took 30 minutes to make the $100 million investment in House of Cards, and it took 30 minutes to cut Kevin Spacey when he was accused of sexual harassment of a teenage boy. That's courage. It requires patience. See that thing going up at 2012? That's when Kelsey was going to go to college, and then she wasn't going to college because of that frickin' Qwikster thing. And then she's going to college at medical school. And the third is humility. What we do is so hard. It's so hard. And if you ever get overconfident, you're going to get crushed. If you ask Reed about the Qwikster thing, he said, I lost my humility. I failed to obsess over customers. That's really what happened. So this is my hope for you today. You'll have many big successes. You'll have smaller failures, but you're engaged in experimentation, so you will have a lot of them. And I'm hoping you can learn from me the value of continuing power in significant markets via Glee, Gem, and frickin' Doom. So with that, I'd like to say thank you. I am happy and ready to answer questions. You can shout and I'll repeat it.
So for a startup, like a early stage, is it all about Glee? It's just about getting big and leading and expanding?
The key thing for the question is, for a startup, is it all about Glee? And actually, it's all about all 3 of those models. The key thing that I tried to point out is the getting big. You're correct in Glee. It's critically important that you find that initial thing that your customers love. Like today, or early on, Chegg had an NPS of 80 for textbook rental. That was a sign that it was like 10 times better than buying a freaking new textbook for $200. So for early stage startups, it's all about that get big and creating overwhelming love from the customer. And yeah, at that moment in time, you're right that most startups start with growth, engagement, and monetization in the early days. The idea of DHM, that's super important as the time plays out. And you saw the devastating effect of failing to build hard to copy, sell a company for $3.5 billion, and 2 years later it's worth $350 million. Bad outcome. Hard to copy is important for everybody. Yes?
So you've had a string of super successful companies.
I left out all the failures.
Okay, I was like,
Yes.
how are you picking
Yeah.
all the winners?
No, I get to say what I say. No, okay. So your question, I believe, is how do you pick great companies?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why did you choose to join Netflix early?
Yeah, so I believe in this idea of a personal board of directors. And so I have 2 or 3 VCs on my personal board of directors. I invest time and energy in startups. They invest hundreds of $millions. They care a lot about money. I've learned this about VCs. And I really, that's an example of they look at companies a little different from me. In my board, I had different people. Some, with Chegg, when I was evaluating, I had people that were focused on education who helped me evaluate. And then I've picked poorly. So I did a neuroscience company, like you'd wire up your brain, and we were going to improve dyslexia, and that did not work. Okay? My first startup was called, or my first internet was called FamilyWonder.com, and it had a very unhappy ending. So you win, you lose. Yes, way down there.
In a startup that grows mostly by word of mouth, how tight are engagement and growth?
The question is, in a startup that it grows largely by word of mouth, how tight are, which 2 did you put?
Higher engagement and growth.
Yeah, okay, so I'll tell you my real answer. In a company that grows by word of mouth, I try to double down on delight. It's all about delight that creates that wow-like experience for you. Think about Netflix in the early days. Like, You could go into Blockbuster, you could spend 5 minutes trying to find a DVD, you'd wait 10 minutes in line for the punk-nosed kid to actually pay, which drives me crazy. You'd bring it home, then your kids would say, Dad, we've already seen it. And then it got worse because you forgot to return it and you owed them $40 for that incredibly bad experience. So think about how much more delightful Netflix is. And I think that was the key in most of these startups. Thank you very much for playing today.